This show is brought to you by Podetize, podcast hosting and done-for-you production services that get you heard by more of your ideal listeners. Visit podetize.com to book a free strategy call. That's PODETIZE.com.
I'll tell you what I got really excited about as I was looking at food as medicine. And that is that while drug developers medical researchers have not yet come up with something that's ready for prime time broadly for stem cell therapy, Mother Nature's already beat everybody to the punch, beat humans to the punch, because there are foods that actually contain natural substances that already stimulate our stem cells, that can improve our circulation, that can help to regenerate our wounds. And to me, that is one of the most exciting things, that we can actually use diet to help coax our stem cells to not just heal, but to regenerate us from the inside out.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Karina Belizzi.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Karina Belizzi, an activist who is passionate about social impact and building a better, more sustainable future. Every week, I invite you to care a little bit more so that we can all be a little better. Today, we're going to discuss something I've touched on a few times before, and that's the social, economic, and even environmental cost of healthcare. Or should we call it sick care? To unpack these challenges and give us insight, we are joined by Dr. William Li. Dr. William Li is an internationally renowned physician, scientist, and author of the New York Times bestseller, Eat to Beat Disease: The New Science of How Your Body Can Heal Itself. His groundbreaking work has led to the development of more than 30 new medical treatments and impacts care for more than 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, and obesity. His TED Talk, Can We Eat to Starve Cancer?, has garnered more than 11 million views. He's appeared on Good Morning America, CNN, CNBC, and The Dr. Oz Show. And he's been featured in USA Today, Time Magazine, The Atlantic, and O Magazine. He is president and medical director of the Angiogenesis Foundation and is leading research into COVID-19. He's someone I'm honestly thrilled to learn from through his written work, his TED Talk, and his YouTube channel. And right now, in this very moment, with all of you. Dr. Li, welcome to the show.
Hello, Karina. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's just such a pleasure to have you here. And I want to start this conversation by saying that I read your book cover to cover, and it both delivered on the title, which is quite audacious, and also surprised me. For one, you didn't take beer, red wine, chocolate, or my prized coffee out of my possible treats. What was the catalyst that set you on the path to write this book?
Karina, this is something I get asked all the time, which is that how does a doctor who has been involved with treatment development, drug development, and biotechnology, how did I actually move over to nutrition? And it really starts with how I grew up. I grew up really appreciating home-cooked foods, whole foods, tasty, delicious foods. And I also spent a gap year between college and medical school before I trained to be a doctor, actually living in the Mediterranean and researching food and culture and how the perception of health was connected to people and what they ate and the land that they grew their food on. And so this is something that was really very deeply connected to who I am. When I went to medical school, of course, I learned 4,000 years worth of medical science packed down into 4 years, and then learned how to write prescriptions, and actually became so inspired by the diseases that we could not actually conquer that I got involved with very sophisticated drug development. So through a field called angiogenesis, which is how the body grows blood vessels, I embarked on looking at common denominators for disease with the idea that if you could actually find a common denominator of disease and of health, you could pull the bow back and send a single arrow through multiple problems at the same time. So this approach actually, which I've done through the Angiogenesis Foundation, has been enormously successful. We've actually come up with 42 new FDA-approved treatments for cancer and complications, diabetes, even blindness. But I realized at the sort of in the midst of all this that we were missing the biggest opportunity of them all, which is to prevent disease in the first place. And for people who are sick, I know as a doctor that my patients always ask me, how bad is it? How long do I have? What do I need to take? And then the fourth questions everybody always asked me was, well, what do I need to eat? And I was never taught that in medical school, and I thought that was wrong. So it led me back to really ask, can we study food, nutrition, using the same science that we have used for drug development, for developing medicines? And so food as medicine is something that I actually not only talk the talk, I've been walking the walk on this. And that led me to realize that, honestly, when it comes to food and health, it's not about kale or celery juice or whatever trend or fad is out there. But it's really not just about the food. It's about how our body responds to what we put inside it. And if you put something bad inside your body, you're going to destroy your health. If you put something good inside your body, you're going to activate your health. And that's really what I focus on, is how do we actually activate the health defenses that are hardwired inside our body?
Well, I love that. I come from the world of health and nutrition, having spent 20 years working in supplements, first in herbal extracts and learning about Chinese medicine and how 100 or more different herbs could be used to promote health or to help the body return to a more normal state after, let's say, an inflammatory event or something to that effect. So I interfaced over the years with many, many doctors. And whenever I was dealing with somebody that was more on that holistic side, I'd hear the same sort of stories, that it really matters what you put in your body, that you're nurturing your health. And when you nurture your health, when you look at food as something that nourishes as opposed to something that fills you up, satiates. I always mispronounce that word, but really that you are able to then catapult yourself forward, reach your best health, live your longest life. And even just meeting with a traditional Chinese doctor and having them like look at your eyes and your tongue and saying, oh, well, you're obviously eating X, Y, and Z that aren't good for your health. And you can meet these challenges by just modifying a little bit of your daily habits or choosing foods that are a broader assortment, grabbing fruits and berries that are dark in color, and that means rich in anthocyanidins and other key nutrients. And so as I read your book, I just found myself continually going back to this one thing. This doctor gets it. Like, this MD understands all of these things that I've spent most of a lifetime learning. And when I go to the doctor, they often say things like, oh, well, you're suffering from seasonal allergies. Let me give you a pill to fix that. And that pill to fix it will be temporary and may give me some other side effects. So I've tended to go to a different route, which is sometimes harder, but also helps to manage my own health. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is really the impact that that has, not only when we hear from a doctor and we trust what they say is gospel, like, okay, I'm going to go take these 3 things to modify my health, or I'm going to exercise and eat right, but I'm not going to stick to it because it's hard and I haven't been told how, really. How do you seek to change what we're doing from, let's say, the Western medicine perspective so that we don't run into these giant costs of continual rises in health costs? It's untenable for most Americans, and they can't afford to cover their medical expenses anymore.
That's such a deep question. And it actually, I think, originates from, it's useful to look at the history of medicine. You mentioned traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, which goes back 3,000 or 4,000 years. And you got to realize the East, the West, if you go into the time machine, the retrospectoscope that far back, there were no medicines. There was no pharmaceuticals. There was no industrialization of medicine. All we had were our bodies, which we still have, and we had the things around us that we encounter every single day, our food. And then occasionally, we can actually go out and look for some more specific items like herbs and spices and herbal healing and all those kinds of medicinal things. So honestly, what you're talking about is really bringing the thread of our history forward to present day and not letting it go. So the division between allopathic versus naturopathic, Western versus Eastern, I think those are sort of the color shirts that we wear to get onto the field and to actually have competition. I look at it differently. To be honest with you, the difference between 3,000 or 4,000 years ago and today is that we have science. And science is an incredibly powerful tool. First and foremost, it tells us how our body actually works. And so I got involved in this by asking something really simple. When I was in medical school, I was taught with diseases. What is cancer? What is heart disease? What is diabetes? What is hypertension? What is Alzheimer's disease? All those things have book answers that you can memorize. And of course, in medical school, we're taught to take something off the shelf, write a prescription, and learn how to manage a disease, which is just chasing disease with drugs. On the other hand, I started to ask the question when I was starting from the beginning of medical school. I asked a slightly different question, which is, what is health? I can define a disease, but what is actually health? And the answer I gave myself for many years was, well, health is just the absence of disease. If I'm not sick, I'm well, right? Actually, that can't be true. And it's a very frustrating answer because you can't do anything about something that's the absence of another thing. So what I started to do is to use the work I had done in doing cancer research and trying to figure out how do we regenerate our body with regenerative therapies and medicine to say, actually, health isn't just the absence of disease. It's in fact the result of a lot of hard work that our body's health defense systems are doing on our behalf every single day from the day we are born until our very last breath. And these health defense systems are ones that were formed in our bodies, along with our organs, along with our heart and our brain, our lungs and our nose and our earlobes. They were formed at the same time. And frankly, they are what's responsible for the fact that we're not sick more often. So the question isn't so much, why did I get cancer, for example? A bigger question is, why don't we get cancer more often? And the answer to that is that our body is actually hardwired to be able to defend us against diseases, invaders from both the outside world and also the inside world, inside our body. And the foods that we eat can actually elevate, activate, boost our health defenses. Or if we eat the wrong things, they can take down those health defenses, beat them down, which then makes us more vulnerable to disease. And so now all of a sudden there's an operational definition to health that is so useful in thinking about how to integrate what we've always known for thousands of years. Generations ago, there was this intuitive recognition that our bodies kind of know what to do if we prompt it the right way. Now we've got science to pull it right to the cutting edge of today.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better or hoped for a better response. I mean, I'm in a situation here where I look at our rising healthcare costs, the standard American, if you average out cost of healthcare from the entire populace, we've spent $3.6 trillion on healthcare in 2018. Now, that's before the pandemic. I don't have current data. I think people are still scrubbing those numbers, but we're talking about an average of $11,172 per person. That's a huge number. And ultimately, most people, if you were to ask them, do you have $1,000 a month to spend on healthcare? They're going to tell you no. So I wonder what your thoughts are about how we can seek to control that. And perhaps it's through implementing some of the basics of your book and getting to this kind of 5 by 5 by 5 framework that you detail throughout it, which puts control of our health a little bit more back in our hands. But I also have heard from many people, oh, well, I don't live near a health food store, or most of the grocery stores that are near me don't have half the foods that might even be mentioned in this book. How do I do it? And so I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about that and what changes you might recommend for somebody who's living in one of those so-called food deserts.
Yeah, so let's take that apart piece by piece. First of all, the escalating costs of healthcare. I'm a trained medical doctor. I have a medical practice. I can tell you, I know just how costly it is to really try to help somebody manage a disease, wrangle with a disease, try to cure a disease once the horse has come out of the barn. Okay. And essentially just literally using that analogy, if you're chasing this wild Mustang that has raced out of the barn, it's going to take a lot of energy to run after, to catch it, try to calm it down, and then hopefully lead it back into the barn. Most cases, these runaway chronic diseases that we're talking about that are so expensive, cardiovascular disease, number one killer, cancer, pulmonary diseases, diseases of metabolism like diabetes and obesity, these are expensive diseases, conditions, and most of them have no cure. So essentially, once you are dealing with that problem, you're continuously throwing resources at it. It's not helpful to the patient. They don't get a relief from it. You just keep on going. And the healthcare system has to keep on chasing it. So it really is sort of like this infinite loop or circling the drain that we're actually doing if you can't prevent your disease. Now, there is a recognition now, I think, even among hardcore traditional physicians, that the body is capable of actually reversing diseases. For example, we know that if you allow your immune system to work at full steam, sometimes with a little bit of helping from an oncologist, for example, using immune therapies, which takes full advantage of your own immune system, you can take cancer that's spread everywhere and you can reverse it and clear the body of all signs of cancer. Do we even call that cure? Actually, not really cure, because that's the wrong term. We've reset the body back to its baseline, where cancer actually has been kind of put back to the genie's back in the bottle. So think about using your own immune system to erase cancer like a dry erase board. That's what our own body is able to do with one of our health defenses. So our immune system is one of our health defenses. Our circulation is another one of our health defenses. We all know cardiovascular disease is extremely costly and it compromises the quality of life. Blockages of our arteries, we blame on red meat and unhealthy fats and lack of exercise and genetics. And, so much of energy in the healthcare system has been, can we do diagnostics and then put a stent in? Can we actually do surgical bypass? Look, all those things can be helpful, but they don't actually put the genie back in the bottle. And researchers over the last 30 or 40 years have actually been able to identify you can take those blockages and you can unblock it, undo damage in the body using the body's own defenses. You can actually ramp up your metabolism and open up those blockages. You can grow more circulation where the circulation isn't flowing adequately for your heart or your brain. You can even regenerate parts of your organs. And diet is the easiest way to be able to do this. And so this is where the science is taking us. How do we actually understand the processes that go from healthy to sick, normal function to abnormal function? How do we look at that continuum? And how do we ask ourselves, can we turn the clock back and figure out how foods that we eat can intercept that? And so much about healthy eating, by the way, Karina, has been about elimination. Don't do that. It's judgmental. Foods are cast as villainous or evil, and then you whip it onto, they put that label, you throw that cloak of that label onto the manufacturers. I have a different point of view. My point of view goes back into sort of this ancient wisdom idea. What foods are good for us? What should we be adding to our bodies? Sure, we can spend a lot of time whipping foods that are not good for us, but that still begs the question, what should we be adding to our diet? And that's really what I have been doing my work on in my book and, in the classes that I teach, and my research now is all really focused on what do we add to activate our body's health defenses that can actually help us avoid those chronic expensive diseases. And if we have them, because a lot of people do have illnesses, you can't avoid everything. How do we actually use food to do that extra bit that medicines can't do?
Right. Well, in your interview with Dr. Mike Hyman a little bit ago, you talked about this personalization of nutrition and healthcare and how we maybe even getting to a space where you're able to create even medical treatments that will be very personalized to the individual so that they can get back to their best health. Now, I imagine these things are expensive to develop, but you've also been involved in creating a new way to guide stem cells where they're needed in the body, which I just think is amazing. I've read a bit of the research and they've been doing quite a bit even in the equine space. I have a horse. He had an injury and I was looking at things that I might do to support that injury, particularly in an area where they don't have a lot of circulation, which the lay public isn't going to know this, but any horse fanatic might. They don't get a lot of circulation in their legs, which is surprising to us because we're humans and we stand up and we think, oh, well, our heart's here, so the blood goes down. But because of the shape of their body and how their blood vessels are, if they get a leg injury, often it's debilitating for a long, long time. So they've been doing research about how you can take stem cells and help to heal an area, because that time to heal has everything to do with if they develop other issues later on. So can you tell us a little bit about this? I just love to know more.
Yeah, well, look, I started my work looking at an area called regenerative medicine. And by regenerative medicine, actually, again, kind of goes back to something we probably all grew up with when we were in kindergarten. Our teachers told us starfish can regenerate, salamanders can regenerate, and those were amazing, but people can't regenerate, right? Well, actually, that's what we thought for a long time. But that chapter has been torn out of that textbook and just thrown out the window, and a new one's being written. We do know that humans and animals, like horses, have the capacity of regeneration. In fact, we do regenerate a little bit every day, and that we regenerate from the inside out using our stem cells. And the stem cells that you're referring to, looking at the equine world for things like foundering and other kind of conditions, like for humans, this idea, can we take some stem cells and inject them to really help the tissue, the body, the limb recover, or the heart or the brain recover a little bit? And it's quite amazing what you can actually do with that. I'll talk about that in 1 second. But I want to talk a little bit about, to make it seem more down to earth for everyone. Look, our bodies are all formed of our stem cells. We are stem cells. When our mom's egg met dad's sperm in the womb, just as a couple of balls of cells, after about 5 days, we started to use stem cells. We became stem cells. We were the stem cells, and we multiplied. And those stem cells are amazing because they can turn into anything. And they turn into the heart, the lung, the liver, the eyeball, the tongue, the big toe. And over the course of 9 months, our stem cells actually became us. Now, when we were born, we didn't use all the stem cells that were available to us, right? So this is like painting a room. If you're going to do a project and paint a room, what are you going to do? You're going to buy paint, but you're not going to buy just the right amount of paint. You're probably going to get an extra can or two. There's nothing worse than running out of the paint. Same thing when we were forming our bodies. When we were born, we had extra stem cells lying around. How many? This has been counted. We've got 750 million extra stem cells that weren't used when we were born. Okay, this is by C-section or by vaginal delivery. And then what did our body do? Like, Mother Nature is so clever. Those extra stem cells got packed away. They got packed away in our bone marrow. They got packed away in our fat, actually. Because think about it. Although most people regret their body weight when they look in the mirror after stepping out of the shower, everyone looks at that cute, chubby baby and says how pudgy and wonderfully chubby the baby is, right? Okay, so that's stem cells packed in that fat. In fact, 5% of all cells in fat actually are made out of immune cells that also continue to communicate and build our immune responses and our metabolism as well. Okay, so what we've actually been able to do is appreciate that if you can remove these stem cells, either from an umbilical cord, so this is stem cell harvesting at birth, get the cord blood, right? That some people do that. You can actually get stem cells from liposuction. So people are actually, it's kind of a crazy thing I've been involved with. There's researchers that are able to do liposuction on people who have some extra body fat, take that fat out. Remember, I told you fat actually has a lot of cells in it, stem cells in it.
Yeah, because we have to be good at growing new fat to survive the hard winter, right?
That's right. And those stem cells actually are embedded in the fat. So what you do, you pour a little bit of enzyme in there, you separate all the fat, and you spin that stuff down. Fat floats to the top, and the stem cells go to the bottom. You pour out the fat, okay? And then you just actually take what's left in those stem cells. A plastic surgeon can hand those cells to a cardiologist who can inject them into your heart, or a veterinarian who could actually inject them into a leg.
Okay, my mind is blown.
And what we do know is that from lab research and from clinical trials, you can actually regenerate parts of the body. I was just reviewing an incredible study. This is a first in human study using a person who had a terrible accident and got completely paralyzed from a cervical injury. So that's a very high up injury to the neck that severs the spinal cord. Couldn't move arms or legs, wheelchair bound, shriveling up, atrophying. And they got an injection of their own stem cells taken from liposuction from their own fat. And over the course of the year, they were able to get up and walk again. Okay, so you can regenerate. By the way, where do they get their stem cells? Not in their legs. They got the stem cells injected into their spinal cord. And so it actually helped to regenerate. So we're not there yet from a biotech perspective, but the future is incredibly exciting. But I'll tell you what I got really excited about as I was looking at food as medicine. And that is that while drug developers medical researchers have not yet come up with something that's ready for prime time broadly for stem cell therapy, Mother Nature's already beat everybody to the punch, beat humans to the punch, because there are foods that actually contain natural substances that already stimulate our stem cells, that can improve our circulation, that can help to regenerate our wounds. And to me, That is one of the most exciting things, that we can actually use diet to help coax our stem cells to not just heal, but to regenerate us from the inside out.
Wow. Well, I love all of that. I do want to get to a basic understanding for our audience of what this 5x5x5 framework is, because I see it as a tool to help people manage their health, whether they live in a food desert, whether they have a deep pocketbook, and get to a space where they can control their own health by managing their body's ability to utilize the stem cells that they have innately born in their body. So can you talk a little bit about how you develop that framework and what people can expect when they read the book and when they go to your website or sign up for your newsletter? I'd just love to cover that quickly.
Yeah, well, look, I'm all about equality and access and sort of democratizing health. And here's the great news, is that those health defense systems, we've got 5 of them. That's the first 5 of the 5x5x5. Everybody has them. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do for work, where you live, whether you're in a desert or not. The bottom line is that you have these 5 health defense systems. Our circulation, angiogenesis, how our body grows blood vessels, our stem cells, which we talked about. That's part of our defenses. A third is our gut microbiome, our healthy gut bacteria. Everybody has those. Our DNA, everybody is made of their own genetic code that helps to protect our health. And then our immune system, which of course everyone has as well. And so the first piece of good news about that 5x5x5 is the first 5 is that we all walk around with our health defenses. That's kind of like part of our endowment or our inheritance from just being born. So everybody's got those. And so the food we eat can activate them. The second 5 is really that, I wrote about more than 200 foods that are not about expensive, luxury class, business class level foods. If you fly business class on an airplane, most of the people are sitting on the back of the plane. There's like 5 people or 10 people sitting in the front. This is not about that. The foods that I write about are completely identified by science. I took a completely agnostic view on it. And it turns out that things that are like the Mediterranean diet, whole plant-based foods, fruits and vegetable, whole grains, nuts and legumes, seeds, healthy oils, things that are not that expensive. In fact, things that are actually originally considered peasant foods, all right? People that definitely did not have a lot of means, economic means. Those are the ones that simply activate our body's health defenses. And so I wrote a list of 200 foods. What I encourage people to do literally is to, if you read my book, open up to the back pages where all those foods are listed. And I tell people to take out a Sharpie and just start circling the foods that you already love. Okay. Don't worry about the science. Just circle the foods that like, oh man, I like raspberries. Oh yeah, I like chocolate. Oh, I like this. Circle them up. And then I want you to sit back and to take a look at how many you've circled. All right. If you got a cell phone, take a photograph of it, of every page where you put a circle. And that's why I use a Sharpie so you can really see it clearly. That means that the foods that you already love are good for you. And those are the ones you should start with. So you're already way ahead of the game before you even look at anything else. Now, here's the other thing about food. We encounter food. So that's the second 5. We encounter food. The third 5 is about 5 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and usually a couple of snacks, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon or in the evening. We tend to kind of like encounter food. So I call this 5 shots on goal. So every time you encounter food, about 5 times, you have an opportunity to make a decision that's either going to activate your health defenses, and hopefully you don't make the decision that you choose something that's going to take them down. But here's also a piece of good news. If on average, most of the time, you are actually doing things to support your health defenses, you can afford to fall off the wagon a little bit because your body's health defenses will be able to take that. So no one's perfect. And so I think that my approach of 5 health defense systems, 200 foods that can feed each of those 5 defenses, just eat at least 5 foods every day, 1 food every day that activates each health defense, and the 5 shots on goal that you have every day. That's a simple way. It's sort of just a way of just getting in your head. I can do something good for myself in 5 ways, about 5 times a day. And that makes us more accountable for our health. And the great news is that these foods taste great. People love them. And many of them are peasant foods. So you don't find these foods at the Michelin star restaurant. Frankly, you can find some of them in a grocery section, even in a gas station if you're in the middle of America. I took a trip across the country last summer. I drove across the country and, it is true. I drove through plenty of food deserts. And the fact of the matter is I went on Instagram Live and I made little videos to show you can go almost anywhere and you can still find some of those foods in the 200 that actually activate your health defenses.
Well, I love the list. I did not pen mine up yet. I wanted to keep it pristine. I think I'll photocopy it and take a list with me. But the reality is that there are many, many foods on here. And as I said before, you didn't take them away a glass of wine a day, a beer a day, and not to say excess, but having some of these things to actually support your health systems. I also went to your website, which is drwilliamli for your name, drwilliamlee.com, and signed up for your newsletter. And I received a download right away that was specific to COVID-19 and 5 things you can do to support your health with recipes, which I thought was really great. And so I think anybody listening now could go and sign up for that newsletter, get that piece. I also understand that you're going to be running a masterclass and that this is something that you're offering at no cost. So I'd love for you to talk for a moment about what that is and how people can find you.
Yeah, well, so people can find me on my website. It's at Dr. Dr. William Lee, L.I., as you have said. My handle is at Dr. Dr. William Lee, L.I., and I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all the usual places. And I'll tell you that I've been doing these master classes because during the first part of 2020, when pandemic first hit, as a medical doctor, I was trying to figure out what I could possibly do to help out. So one thought I had was to put on my white coat and go downtown and see if I could help to bail people out in the emergency room or the ICU. I'm a card-carrying doctor. I could certainly do that. But then I realized that we actually know almost nothing about this disease. Research still needs to happen. So I put on my research hat and I started to dive into doing research on the coronavirus. Not an area that I ever thought I would actually be involved with, but it was fascinating. Within the first 60 days, we made a big discovery that in COVID, your blood vessels are affected. And that actually is my wheelhouse. And so all of a sudden, I got sucked into the center of the whole research area. But the other thing that during that period is that I'm sure like everyone watching this, I would spend a lot of time staring out the window saying, the heck was going on? And what could we do about it, right? So nobody likes to sit around doing nothing and feeling helpless. And that's where I realized that in a time of crisis that we went through, as every human on the planet, doctors can't always prescribe a medicine. They don't always have a test to diagnose a disease. Hospitals can't always help you or save you. And in fact, during that period, people wanted to stay away from doctors. In fact, doctors wanted patients to stay away from their clinics. And hospitals couldn't do very much, and they were overwhelmed. And that's when it became crystal clear to me that something that we could all do was to make a decision to eat every single day. We had to eat our meals. We had to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a couple of snacks. We all ran out into the grocery store and brought stuff back, and we filled up our pantries. And I realized this was the moment, if there was ever a moment, to know that the decisions that we make, the empowerment that we have from knowing which foods can activate our health defenses to protect us, including our immune system. There were no vaccines at the beginning. That was the single biggest advantage that we could actually have against an unknown. And so I decided to start putting together these master classes, which I do every month and every other month. Just come to my website. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'll tell you about my master class. It's completely free. And what I do is I come on and I talk about your health defenses. I talk about new research on foods. I talk about new discoveries. The research on food, that can be helpful. And I try to focus on clinical research involves humans, not mice and not things that happen in the test tubes. I talk about what we're learning about people and why it actually works. There is no reason that kind of research should stay on the bookshelf or in a library or only among the research community. That kind of information needs to be heard by people. And that's why I started to do these master classes. I encourage everyone to sign up. It's completely free. What I do is I literally get up there and I'll sometimes hold up a research paper and I'll talk about new things that we're learning that can empower you to be able to actually make a decision that could change your life. I'll give you a quick example. About 3 weeks ago, in a major journal called Science, a big cancer center called MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas, working with the National Institutes of Health, were looking at cancer patients who are getting immune treatments, those immunotherapies we talked about just a few moments ago. And they're quite amazing because they can help your immune system clear out cancer, but they only works in about 20% of people. 80% of people, most of the people, it doesn't actually have a good effect on. So they went to look in their gut. They looked in a poop and they found that the people who responded had one bacteria called ruminococcus. And then they asked, what did they eat to get that ruminococcus? And they found that it was dietary fiber, foods with fiber not supplements. In fact, they found that the supplements didn't actually work really well, but whole foods with fiber, soluble fiber, actually worked. And they calculated for every 5 grams of dietary fiber, 5 grams of dietary fiber is the amount that you'd find in an average medium-sized pear or a big apple, okay, that would actually lower the risk of mortality or the chances that cancer would grow by 30% for every 5 grams per day. And that kind of information, I just felt like it's such credible research in a credible journal that cancer patients are always asking their doctors, what should I be eating, doc? And they don't get the answer. They don't get an answer, but now research is starting to deliver. So this is what I do in my masterclasses. I talk about the latest research, and I try to get people to be excited by the fact that science is blazing the way forward when it comes to food and health.
Well, I can't wait. I'm coming. You can't keep me from it. We've already covered so much ground, and I could keep you here for hours if you'd let me. So I just want to thank you again for your amazing work, from the important research on stem cells to what you're doing to help people take control of their health. I just love it all. So thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for your hard work and for joining us today.
Thank you, Karina.
I'll be sure to include Dr. William Lee's website, book, and the research that we mentioned today on the show in show notes, which are always available on caremorebebetter.com, along with the complete blog, video interview, and even a surprise or two. As you consider what we've covered today, I want you to think about how eating to truly nourish your body changes how you see what you eat and what you drink. You might choose fewer hamburgers and more carrots, berries, and nuts instead. You might include a dark chocolate, a pint of beer, or a glass of nice red wine, with the goal of helping your body reach its best possible health. And if you're ready to get activistic about foods and learn more about what you can do to improve access in your area, I encourage you to do a little research. You might even go to my episode with Ethan Welty on falling fruit and log some fruit trees in your neighborhood. Heck, organize a party to go and pick that fruit that would otherwise fall to the ground and share it with the friends and family around you. Look at farmers markets. Consider harvesting fruit. You'll likely support that activistic strike within yourself. And if you want to know how to organize, you can always sign up for my newsletter, caremorebebetter.com, and you'll receive a 5-step guide to help unleash your inner activist. So what did we talk about today? 5 by 5 by 5 framework, and now 5 ways to unleash your inner activist. I'd also encourage you to go to drwilliamlee.com and sign up for his newsletter. Join me and him, and I'm sure an onslaught of many more people in his masterclass. I look forward to staying connected. Thank you, listeners, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more, and we can be better. We can even reach our optimal health just by making a few small changes. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.
This show is brought to you by Podetize, podcast hosting and done-for-you production services that get you heard by more of your ideal listeners. Visit podetize.com to book a free strategy call. That's PODETIZE.com.